The Alchemist's Secret, a journey through time and transformation. Settle in, dear listener, as we journey back through the mists of time to explore one of history's most enduring mysteries. Tonight, we'll walk alongside the alchemists of old, those patient seekers who spent lifetimes in dimly lit laboratories, pursuing a dream that consumed civilizations. Close your eyes and let yourself drift into their world, a world of flickering candlelight, bubbling retorts, and the eternal hope of transformation. The dawn of the great work. In a stone chamber in Alexandria, Egypt, sometime around the year 300 CE, an elderly man named Zosimos bent over his workbench. The Mediterranean sun filtered through narrow windows, casting golden beams across rows of glass vessels, each containing liquids of different colors: crimson, emerald, deep amber. The air was thick with the scent of sulfur and strange herbs. Zosimos had spent 40 years in this room, pursuing what he called the great work, the philosopher's stone, the chrysopoeia, the elixir of life. It had many names across many lands, but the promise remained the same. A mysterious substance that could transform base metals into gold and grant eternal life to those who possessed its secrets. But was it ever truly about the gold? Or did this legendary stone represent something far deeper in the human soul? To understand the alchemist's secret, we must first understand that alchemy was never merely chemistry, though it would eventually give birth to that science. Alchemy was a sacred art, a spiritual discipline disguised in the language of metals and elements. The laboratory was a temple, and the alchemist was both priest and penitent. Zosimos wrote in his treatises that the work required not just knowledge of substances, but purity of spirit. To perform the work, he inscribed on papyrus scrolls that would survive 1,500 years, the operator must himself be transformed. This was the first clue to the deeper meaning of the stone. Transformation began within. The wisdom of ancient worlds. The roots of alchemy stretched back even further than Zosimos into the mystery schools of ancient Egypt and the philosophical traditions of Greece. In the temple workshops of Memphis and Thebes, Egyptian metallurgists had learned to alloy metals, creating substances that gleamed like gold, but were not. They could tint glass to look like precious stones. To the uninitiated, these seemed like magical transformations. But the Egyptian priests knew these were merely manipulations of matter. Their real wisdom lay deeper, in understanding that all substances shared certain fundamental properties, that matter itself was fluid and changeable. The universe, they taught, was not fixed but eternally becoming. If base metals could be made to resemble gold, might they not actually become gold, given the right conditions, the right catalyst? The Greeks inherited this wisdom and added their own philosophical frameworks. Aristotle proposed that all matter was composed of 4 elements: earth, water, air, and fire, combined in different proportions. Change those proportions, alter the balance, and you could theoretically change one substance into another. It was logical, it was reasonable, and it would inspire centuries of searching. Plato spoke of ideal forms, perfect templates that existed in a realm beyond the physical. Every gold object in the world was but an imperfect reflection of the ideal of gold itself. The alchemist's task, then, was to bring matter closer to its ideal form, to perfect it, to help it achieve its destined state. In this view, gold was not just another metal. Gold was perfection. It did not tarnish or corrode. It remained eternally bright and beautiful. It was, the ancients believed, the final stage of metallic evolution. All other metals were gold in the process of becoming, arrested at various stages of development. Lead was sick gold. Copper was immature gold. The philosopher's stone would be the medicine that healed metals, the catalyst that completed their natural journey, the Islamic Golden Age. As the Roman Empire crumbled and Europe descended into darker ages, the torch of learning passed eastward. In the great cities of the Islamic world, Baghdad, Cairo, Cordoba, alchemy flourished under a new name, alchemia, from which our word alchemy derives. The Islamic alchemists, or hakim, approached the art with systematic rigor. Jabir ibn Hayyan, known in the West as Geber, worked in 8th century Iraq, establishing the foundations of experimental chemistry. In his laboratory in Kufa, Jabir developed techniques of distillation, crystallization, and sublimation that would be used for 1,000 years. But Jabir understood that he was doing more than chemistry. In his Book of the 70, he wrote extensively about the spiritual dimensions of the work. The 7 metals gold, silver, copper, iron, tin, lead, and mercury corresponded to the 7 classical planets. They corresponded to the 7 stages of spiritual development. The transformation of lead into gold was an outer symbol of the inner transformation from ignorance to wisdom, from corruption to purity. The laboratory procedures were encoded with layers of meaning. When Jabir heated cinnabar, mercury sulfide, and collected the mercury that condensed on the cool surface of his apparatus, he was not just separating a metal from its ore. He was demonstrating how the soul could be separated from the body, purified, and reunited in a more perfect form. Other Islamic scholars contributed to the growing body of alchemical knowledge. Al-Razi, a Persian physician and alchemist of the 9th century, classified substances into minerals, vegetables, and animals, and described numerous chemical operations with unprecedented clarity. But he too saw the work as fundamentally spiritual. The seeker after truth, he wrote, must purify his soul before he can purify matter. In the libraries of Cordoba, where Islamic Spain reached its cultural zenith, manuscripts accumulated that contained not just procedures, but entire cosmologies. The alchemist worked in imitation of nature, but also in imitation of God, who had created the world from nothing and who continued to guide its transformation toward perfection. The stone comes to Europe. The 12th and 13th centuries saw an explosion of translation. Latin scholars, hungry for the knowledge preserved in Arabic texts, traveled to Spain and Sicily, where Islamic and Christian cultures intersected. They translated thousands of manuscripts, and among them were the works of the great Islamic alchemists. Europe awakened to alchemy with the enthusiasm of the newly converted. Monasteries and universities became centers of alchemical study. The pursuit of the philosopher's stone attracted minds both brilliant and foolish, genuine seekers and outright charlatans. In the cold stone laboratories beneath medieval monasteries, monks saw no contradiction between their Christian faith and the alchemical work. Indeed, they found profound spiritual parallels. Was not the transformation of bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ the greatest of all transmutations? Was not the resurrection of the body a kind of spiritual alchemy, transforming corruption into incorruption? Roger Bacon, the 13th century Franciscan friar and philosopher, studied alchemy at Oxford. He believed that the philosopher's stone was real and attainable, but that it required both experimental knowledge and divine grace. There are 2 kinds of knowledge, he wrote, that which comes through argument and that which comes through experience. The stone required both. Bacon understood the stone as representing the perfection of nature. Nature, left to herself, worked slowly to transform base metals into gold deep within the earth. The alchemist's task was to accelerate this natural process, to be nature's assistant and midwife. But this required understanding nature's laws and working in harmony with them. The symbolism grew richer and more complex. The stone was compared to Christ himself, despised and rejected, small and easily overlooked, yet containing within itself the power of redemption and transformation. The alchemical process of dissolution and coagulation, of breaking down and rebuilding, mirrored the death and resurrection of Christ, and also the death and rebirth of the initiate in spiritual transformation. the language of symbols. By the 14th century, alchemy had developed an elaborate symbolic language. This served multiple purposes. It protected trade secrets from competitors, it concealed dangerous knowledge from those unprepared to use it wisely, and it expressed spiritual truths that could not be captured in literal language. An alchemical text might describe a green lion devouring the sundae. To the uninitiated, this was gibberish. To the alchemist, it might mean that vitriol, green lion, dissolved gold, the sun. Or it might mean that the wild, untamed aspect of the soul, green lion, needed to consume and integrate the principle of consciousness, sun. The famous image of the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, appeared frequently in alchemical manuscripts. It represented the eternal cycle of transformation, the unity of opposites, the self-sufficient work that contained within itself everything needed for completion. Nature, the alchemist taught, operated in cycles. Death fed life. Decay produced growth. The end returned to the beginning. Another common symbol was the conjunction of opposites, sun and moon, king and queen, sulfur and mercury. The alchemists believed that all substances contained dual principles, an active, masculine, fiery principle, sulfur, and a passive, feminine, watery principle, mercury. The Philosopher's Stone would perfectly balance these opposites, and its creation required the symbolic marriage of these opposing forces. In the great alchemical text known as the Rosarium Philosophorum, or the Rose Garden of the Philosophers, a series of woodcut illustrations showed a king and queen representing solar and lunar principles meeting, courting, marrying, dying together, putrefying, and finally rising again as a single hermaphroditic being. The perfected stone, the reconciliation of all opposites. These symbols were not mere decoration. They were meditation tools designed to bypass the rational mind and speak directly to the intuition. An alchemist might spend hours contemplating a single image, allowing its meaning to unfold in layers, each deeper than the last. The great European alchemists. As we move through the 15th and 16th centuries, certain names emerge from the mists of history, alchemists whose legends have never entirely faded. Nicolas Flamel, a Parisian scribe and bookseller, reportedly achieved the great work in 1382. According to his own account, he purchased a mysterious book, the Book of Abraham the Jew, that contained encoded instructions for creating the Philosopher's Stone. After 21 years of study and experimentation, working with his wife Perenelle, Flamel claimed to have successfully transmuted mercury into gold. Whether this was true or not, Flamel became conspicuously wealthy later in life, endowing churches and hospitals with lavish gifts. After his death, treasure hunters broke into his house and tore up the floors searching for hidden gold. They found nothing. But the legend of Flamel persisted through the centuries, growing with each retelling. What's particularly interesting about Flamel's account is his emphasis on the spiritual preparation required. He described receiving visions and dreams that helped him understand the book's cryptic instructions. The work, he insisted, was as much about purifying his own soul as about purifying metals. The gold he produced was almost a side effect of his spiritual transformation. In Prague, the eccentric Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II gathered alchemists from across Europe to his court. His palace became a laboratory, where learned men conducted experiments, debated theories, and sought the elusive stone. Rudolf genuinely believed that alchemy held the key to understanding God's creation, and he spent a fortune supporting alchemical research. One of the most famous alchemists at Rudolf's court was Edward Kelly, an Englishman who claimed to possess both the Philosopher's Stone and the ability to communicate with angels. Kelly, along with his partner John Dee, mathematician, astrologer, and advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, captivated Rudolph with demonstrations that seemed to show genuine transmutation. Were these demonstrations real or fraudulent? The historical evidence is ambiguous. What's clear is that Dee and Kelly believed they were engaged in a sacred work, a form of divine revelation. Their elaborate angelic communications, recorded in Dee's journals, described the alchemical work in cosmic terms. The transformation of matter was part of the redemption of all creation, the restoration of the world to its original, unfallen state. Paracelsus and the medicine of metals. No discussion of Renaissance alchemy would be complete without Paracelsus, the Swiss physician and alchemist who revolutionized medicine in the 16th century. Born Theophrastus von Hohenheim, he adopted the name Paracelsus, meaning beyond Celsus, claiming to surpass the famous Roman physician. Paracelsus was a complicated figure, brilliant, arrogant, frequently drunk, and genuinely innovative. He rejected much of traditional medicine, famously burning the works of Galen and Avicenna, and insisted that doctors should learn from experience and experimentation rather than ancient authorities. But for Paracelsus, alchemy was primarily about healing, not gold-making. He believed that diseases were caused by chemical imbalances in the body and could be cured with chemical medicines. He pioneered the use of mercury, antimony, and other mineral substances in treatment, creating a new field called iatrochemistry, or chemical medicine. Yet Paracelsus also understood the deeper symbolism of alchemy. In his view, the human body was a microcosm, a small-scale model of the universe itself. What happened in the alchemists' retort also happened in the human body. The same processes of purification, dissolution, and reintegration that transformed base metals into gold could transform a diseased body into a healthy one and an ignorant soul into a wise one. The Philosopher's Stone, for Paracelsus, was not primarily about transmuting metals. It was about transmuting the human being from a mortal, limited creature into something higher and more perfect. It was the medicine that could cure all diseases, extend life, and even grant immortality not through magic, but by perfecting the body's natural chemistry. This reinterpretation of alchemy had profound implications. It shifted the focus from gold-making to self-transformation, from material profit to spiritual and physical health. The laboratory became a place of healing, and the alchemist became a physician of both body and soul. The Age of Skepticism. As we enter the 17th century, the winds of change begin to blow through the alchemical laboratories. The scientific revolution was underway, and a new breed of natural philosophers, we would call them scientists, began to question ancient authorities and demand empirical evidence. Robert Boyle, one of the founders of modern chemistry, was fascinated by alchemy but approached it with a more critical eye. In his book The Skeptical Chymist, published in 1661, Boyle questioned the traditional theory of 4 elements and argued for a more experimental approach to understanding matter. Yet Boyle never entirely dismissed the possibility of transmutation. He conducted his own alchemical experiments and corresponded with other alchemists throughout his life. The great Isaac Newton, the man who would formulate the laws of motion and universal gravitation, spent more time on alchemy than on physics. Among Newton's papers, discovered after his death, were over 1 million words on alchemical subjects. He copied out ancient texts, conducted experiments, and sought to understand what the old masters had truly meant by their cryptic language. For Newton, alchemy was not mere superstition. It was a serious investigation into the hidden forces of nature. He believed that gravity itself might be a kind of alchemical principle, an invisible force that operated across space to bind the cosmos together. The Philosopher's Stone represented the key to understanding these hidden forces, the secret principle that unified all of nature. But Newton's alchemy remained secret, hidden from his public work on physics and mathematics. Already, the intellectual climate was changing. The mechanical philosophy, the idea that nature operated like a machine according to mathematical laws, was replacing the older, organic worldview of the alchemists. The transformation of understanding. By the 18th century, alchemy was increasingly dismissed as outdated superstition. The new science of chemistry, pioneered by Antoine Lavoisier and others, established rigorous experimental methods and mathematical precision. Lavoisier's law of conservation of mass seemed to rule out transmutation matter could not be created or destroyed, only rearranged. When Lavoisier lost his head to the guillotine during the French Revolution in 1794, a contemporary reportedly remarked, "It took only a moment to sever that head, but France may not produce another like it in a century." The age of reason had triumphed, and with it, the age of alchemy seemed to have ended. Yet alchemy did not die. It transformed, as it had always taught, that all things must transform. Some alchemists retreated into secret societies, the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, and others where the symbolic and spiritual aspects of the work could be preserved. These societies taught that the great work was indeed about transformation, but not of metals. It was about the transformation of the human being from ignorance to enlightenment, from vice to virtue, from mortality to spiritual immortality. The rituals of these secret societies were based on alchemical symbolism. The initiate entered a dark chamber, the nigredo, the blackening, the first stage of the alchemical work, underwent trials and tribulations, the dissolution and purification, and emerged reborn, enlightened, transformed, the rubedo, the reddening, the final stage. In these traditions, the Philosopher's Stone was explicitly understood as a symbol of spiritual perfection. It was the perfected self, the realized potential of human consciousness. The work of creating the stone was the work of creating oneself, of integrating the shadow and the light, of balancing the masculine and feminine, of reconciling all the opposites within one's own psyche. Carl Jung and the rebirth of alchemy. In the 20th century, alchemy found an unlikely champion in Carl Gustav Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and founder of analytical psychology. Jung discovered alchemical texts in the 1920 seconds and was struck by their psychological significance. Jung recognized that the alchemical symbols, the conjunction of opposites, the death and rebirth, the transformation through stages precisely mirrored the process of psychological development that he observed in his patients. The alchemical work was a metaphor for what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming a whole, integrated person. The Philosopher's Stone, in Jung's interpretation, was the self, not the ego, but the totality of the psyche, conscious and unconscious, united. The base metal was the undeveloped personality, fractured and unintegrated. The process of creating the stone with its stages of blackening, whitening, yellowing, and reddening was the process of psychological transformation. Jung spent decades studying alchemical texts and wrote extensively about their psychological meaning. In his view, the alchemists had been conducting a kind of unconscious psychology, projecting their own inner processes onto the material they worked with in their laboratories. When an alchemist saw a substance dissolve in acid, turn black, and putrefy, he was witnessing his own ego dissolution, his encounter with the shadow, his descent into the darkness of the unconscious. When he saw the solution clarify, crystallize, and take on brilliant colors, he was witnessing the emergence of new consciousness, the birth of new possibilities. The alchemists, Jung argued, were doing real work, but they didn't understand that the true laboratory was within. The gold they sought was not the yellow metal, but the golden light of consciousness, the priceless treasure of self-knowledge, the universal symbol. As we drift toward the end of our journey, let us return to our original question. What did the Philosopher's Stone truly represent? In the most literal sense, it represented gold, wealth, power, security. In an age of uncertainty, when kingdoms rose and fell, when plague could wipe out 1/3 of Europe's population, when even kings could die in poverty, the promise of unlimited gold was compelling. It meant freedom from want, the ability to fund grand projects, to build hospitals and universities, to pursue knowledge without the constraints of poverty. But most serious alchemists were not primarily motivated by greed. They could have made more money more easily in other pursuits. No, they were drawn to alchemy by something deeper. For some, the stone represented humanity's power over nature. If base metals could be transmuted into gold, then nature was not fixed and immutable. It could be understood, manipulated, perfected. The stone was the key to this understanding, the proof that human reason and skill could unlock nature's secrets. For others, the stone represented spiritual perfection. Just as nature worked slowly to perfect metals, turning lead into gold over eons deep within the earth, so God worked to perfect souls. The alchemist who created the Philosopher's Stone was participating in this divine work, becoming a co-creator with God, helping to bring creation to its destined perfection. The stone was also the reconciliation of opposites. In a world torn by religious wars, by conflicts between faith and reason, by the struggle between spirit and matter, the stone promised a unity, a wholeness. It was both physical and spiritual, both material and transcendent. It proved that these opposites were not truly separate, but two aspects of a single reality. Perhaps most profoundly, the Philosopher's Stone represented the human potential for transformation. We are not fixed in our nature. We can change, we can grow, we can overcome our limitations. The base metal of our current state can become the gold of our perfected potential. This is why the symbol has endured long after the literal search for transmutation was abandoned. We still speak of alchemical transformation when we mean profound change. We still recognize in the alchemical journey a map of our own inner journeys, the laboratory within. Imagine, if you will, an alchemist in his laboratory late at night. The fire in his furnace burns low, casting dancing shadows on the walls. His apparatus, the alembics and retorts, the cucurbits and pelicans gleam in the firelight like a glassware sculpture. He has been working for decades on the great work. His hands are stained with chemicals, his lungs weakened by fumes. He has lost wealth, friendships, perhaps even family in his obsessive pursuit. But as he watches the substance in his flask slowly change color, as he sees it clarify and begin to crystallize, he experiences something beyond words. It is not just the thrill of chemical transformation. It is a sense of participating in something vast and meaningful, of touching the very foundations of reality, of witnessing the creative power that drives all change and growth in the universe. In that moment, he understands that the stone he seeks is not separate from himself. The transformation he witnesses in the flask is reflecting the transformation occurring within him. All these years of patient work, of failure and perseverance, of hope and disappointment, have changed him. The base metal of his former self, proud, impatient, grasping, has dissolved away. Something new is crystallizing in its place. This is the alchemist's secret. The stone that turns lead into gold is consciousness itself. Not the ordinary consciousness that observes and manipulates, but the deeper awareness that participates in transformation, that is itself transformed in the process of transforming. The modern echo, even today, in our age of particle accelerators and genetic engineering, the symbol of the Philosopher's Stone retains its power. We have actually achieved transmutation. Particle accelerators can indeed change one element into another, though at tremendous expense and in tiny quantities. We have created gold from lead, just as the alchemists dreamed, though by methods they never imagined. But this literal achievement somehow misses the point. The gold created in a particle accelerator is just gold, valuable only for its rarity and utility. It does not carry with it the meaning that the alchemists sought. The true philosopher's stone, the catalyst of transformation, the medicine of metals and souls, remains as elusive and as compelling as ever. We seek it in self-help books and meditation retreats, in psychotherapy and spiritual practices, in art and poetry and music. We seek the thing that will transform us, that will turn the lead of our suffering into the gold of wisdom, that will reconcile our inner conflicts and make us whole. The alchemists would recognize this search. They would understand that we are still engaged in the great work, still seeking to perfect our nature, still hoping to find or create that miraculous catalyst that will complete the transformation. The Eternal Journey, in a manuscript from the 14th century, housed now in a library in Paris, an unknown alchemist wrote, "The stone is everywhere and nowhere. It is despised by fools and treasured by the wise. It is common and rare, precious and worthless. It is one thing and many things. It is the beginning and the end." This riddle captures the paradoxical nature of the stone. It cannot be grasped by the ordinary mind because it exists in the realm of transformation itself, in the space between what is and what might be. The search for the Philosopher's Stone was never about reaching a destination. It was about the journey itself, about the transformation that occurs in the seeker during the search. Every failure taught patience. Every setback taught humility. Every small success taught hope. The work shaped the worker. Those who sought the stone with pure hearts, who saw in it not just gold but the glory of creation, who pursued it not for power but for understanding, these seekers found their stone, though not always in the form they expected. Some found it in moments of illumination, sudden insights into the nature of reality. Others found it in the deep satisfaction of mastery, the ability to work skillfully with matter and energy. Still others found it in the peace that comes from accepting limitation, from understanding that perfection is not a state to be achieved, but a direction to travel. The legacy of the alchemists surrounds us in ways we scarcely recognize. Modern chemistry grew directly from alchemical practice. The laboratory techniques, the apparatus, even much of the terminology all derive from alchemy. When a chemist speaks of a catalyst, she is using a term coined by alchemists for the philosopher's stone, the substance that enables transformation without itself being transformed. Psychology, too, owes a debt to alchemy. Jung's work showed that alchemical symbolism provides a rich language for describing psychological transformation. Therapists still speak of the work, still describe therapy as a process of dissolution and reintegration, still seek the integration of opposites that the alchemists called the conjunction. Even our everyday language retains alchemical traces. When we speak of someone having a golden touch or turning everything to gold, we echo the alchemical dream. When we talk about refining our skills or distilling our thoughts, we use alchemical metaphors. But the deepest legacy is in the realm of meaning. The alchemists insisted that the material world is not mere dead matter but is alive with significance, that every substance and every process can be read as a symbol, that the outer world reflects inner truths. In an age that often reduces everything to mechanism and chance, that sees nature as just resources to be exploited, the alchemical vision offers an alternative, a world enchanted with meaning, where transformation is always possible, where the search for understanding is inseparable from the search for self-transformation. The stone in every heart. Let us consider one final image, one that brings together all we have explored on this long night's journey through the alchemical centuries. In the human heart, that muscular pump that we now understand in mechanical terms, the alchemists saw a furnace, an athanor, the vessel in which the great work is accomplished. The heat of this furnace is love, and love has the power to transform everything it touches. Love can take the base metal of selfishness and transmute it into generosity. It can take the lead of hatred and turn it into the gold of compassion. It can dissolve the hardest barriers between people, purify the most corrupted relationships, and create new bonds more precious than any metal. This is not sentiment or metaphor. This is the actual experience of transformation that humans have undergone throughout history. People who seemed fixed in their ways, hardened by bitterness or crippled by fear, have been transformed by love, love of another person, love of an ideal, love of God, love of truth. The Philosopher's Stone, then, might be found in the human capacity for love, which is the capacity for transformation. It is common. Everyone has a heart. It is rare true love is precious and not easily found. It is despised by fools who see it as weakness and treasured by the wise who recognize it as the greatest power. This stone lies hidden in every human heart, waiting to be discovered, refined, and brought to perfection. The work of activating it is the work of a lifetime, requiring patience, dedication, and the willingness to endure the fire of transformation. Closing reflections. As our journey draws to a close, as the candles burn low in the Alchemists' laboratory of the mind, we can appreciate the profound wisdom hidden in the symbol of the Philosopher's Stone. It was never just about gold, though gold was part of its meaning. It was never just chemistry, though chemistry was part of the work. It was never just spirituality, though spiritual transformation was central to the quest. The stone represented, and still represents, the human conviction that transformation is possible, that we need not remain forever as we are, that base can become noble, sick can become well, ignorant can become wise, mortal can touch immortal. In seeking to transform metals, the alchemists discovered processes that would become the foundation of chemistry. In seeking to purify matter, they learned to purify their own motivations and perceptions. In seeking eternal life, they found something more valuable: a life of meaning, purpose, and continuous growth. The great work continues. In every laboratory where scientists probe the secrets of matter, in every studio where artists transmute raw materials into beauty, in every consulting room where therapists help people transform suffering into growth, in every heart that chooses love over fear, the ancient quest goes on. The Philosopher's Stone is not lost in the past. It exists, as it always has, in the realm of possibility, waiting for those with the dedication to seek it, the courage to undergo the trials of transformation, and the wisdom to recognize it when they find it not as a thing possessed, but as a power realized, not as an end achieved, but as a journey embraced, a final vision. Close your eyes now, dear listener, and imagine yourself in that stone chamber we visited at the beginning of our journey. But this time, you are not just observing the old alchemist. You are the alchemist. Before you, your life's work is spread out not in flasks and retorts, but in experiences, relationships, choices made and unmade, successes and failures, joys and sorrows. All of it is the raw material of the great work. The fire that heats your vessel is the fire of your own life force, your passion, your love, your will to grow and become. The substances that dissolve and recombine are aspects of yourself, your strengths and weaknesses, your light and shadow, your past and your potential. You have been engaged in this work all along, whether you knew it or not. Every challenge you faced was a stage in the process. Every loss that dissolved your certainties, every new insight that crystallized into understanding, every moment when opposites within you found reconciliation, all of these were part of creating the stone. And what is the stone you are creating? It is simply this: your truest self, your completed nature, the gold that was always hidden in the lead of your ordinary days. It is who you are, becoming through the patient work of living consciously, loving fully, learning constantly. The work is not yet complete. It never is, not in a single lifetime. But that is not failure. The alchemists understood that the great work is eternal, that perfection is not a state but a direction, that transformation is not an event but a process without end. Rest now in this understanding. Let the symbols and stories of the alchemists settle into your dreams. Let the fire in the furnace burn low. The work will continue tomorrow, as it has continued through all the tomorrows since human beings first looked at the world and imagined it could be transformed. The philosopher's stone that turns lead into gold represents the power of transformation itself, the power that dwells in nature, in consciousness, in love, in dedication, in hope. It represents our deepest truth, that we are not fixed, not finished, not doomed to remain as we are. We are works in progress, base metals on the way to becoming gold. Sleep well, dear listener. May your dreams be filled with the gentle glow of the alchemical fire, with visions of transformation and renewal, with the quiet confidence that the great work continues in you and through you forever. The laboratory is dark now. The furnace has cooled to embers, but in the morning, the work will begin again, as it always does, as it always will, in the eternal laboratory of the soul. Good night.